Is it even physically possible for these movies to get any bigger or any dumber? So Hobbs and Shaw is a spin-off from the Fast and Furious franchise and tells the story of Hobbs and Shaw teaming up to take down a cyber-genetically engineered villain trying to have this world-dominating virus. Well, here we are, everybody, the first and certainly not the last that we're going to see of spin-offs from the Fast and Furious franchise, focusing on the two characters played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Jason Statham. What I honestly think are the two actors and the only two actors in modern action cinema that you can consider action stars. Like in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, you had action stars. You had Charles Bronson, you had Bruce Willis, you had, of course, Schwarzenegger and Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, even Steven Seagal to a certain degree. Nowadays, you don't really have action stars except for The Rock and Jason Statham. And in The Fate of the Furious, these two characters are brought together, and most people who saw that film, not necessarily one of them, thought that every scene regarding these two and their back and forth banter were the best part of that film. Everybody was screaming for a spin-off. They put it into production amidst some drama from Tyrese, but we won't get into that. And now we have Hobbs and Shaw. So a little bit of backstory for me regarding my fandom or lack thereof of the Fast and Furious franchise. I wasn't necessarily on the train right away when the Fast and the Furious came out, and it was kind of like the Point Break remake to a degree. Then it spawned a franchise that each one got a little flashier, a little bit more neon. It was a very, like, from what age I was, it was a very teenage girl-driven fan base. But then those movies kind of evolved. When you got Vin Diesel back into the mix, and especially when you got to Fast 5, which to me is the best in the franchise and one of the best action movies ever made, honestly, I will contend that. The movies got much more of like heist films, much more big, bombastic action films, to the point that now they're basically superhero films. They're basically part of the MCU that nobody has said is canon. And while every single one of these films, even the ones that I will consider the worst of this franchise, all entertain me, I can watch every single one of them and have a good time with it, I do find myself slightly disappointed with how much bigger and dumber they continue to get since Fast 5, which to me is when they had the perfect mix. Since then, they keep getting more ridiculous, more out of this world with the stunts that they're pulling off, the things that these people are able to do with their bodies. And Hobbs and Shaw, for better or for worse, is the biggest and the dumbest movie in this entire franchise. And before I even get into my actual positives and negatives regarding the movie itself, that is a very important thing to say right there. And that's basically what's gonna split everybody completely down the middle regarding this film. There's two kinds of people that will walk in and out of this film. People that love how big and dumb that it is and have an absolute blast with it, or people that hate how big and dumb that it is and think it's the most ridiculous thing they've ever seen. And if you watch the trailer, that will separate you right there. If you thought it looked awesome, you will enjoy the film. If you thought it looked fucking ridiculous, this movie is not gonna change that. So starting off with the positives for Hobbs and Shaw, the biggest thing for me is the action sequences themselves. They're shot very well, the special effects are damn near flawless, they're huge, gigantic action scenes, there's multiple action scenes throughout the entire movie, to the point where there was one that was so monumentally huge that I thought it was the finale of the film, and then there was another 20-30 minutes after that. So they just keep topping themselves throughout this film with how big, huge, and ridiculous the action scenes get. And if you're on board for it, they're an absolute blast.
On my 3, 1! Ah! Woo! Hey, you see the look on his face? You have no idea how long I've been waiting to do that. Yeah.
Second best thing about this movie, which would be most people's best, is the actual camaraderie and back and forth banter between The Rock and Jason Statham. They have a lot of kind of butting heads, like it's a typical buddy cop kind of setup where they don't like each other at first, they're constantly riffing on each other, and by the third act they find out that they're really good together and they become best friends basically. It's the thing that we've seen 1,000 times, but it does work good with these two characters. It does work good with these two actors. They both have very larger than life personalities and kind of the more suave kind of, you know, finesse of Jason Statham, kind of digging into the more bombastic, larger-than-life brute force of The Rock. It does have a lot of physical and dialogue comedy that the movie does pretty much squeeze every last bit of juice out of. I also really liked Idris Elba as the villain. He's got generic motivations, but the way that they kind of shoot this guy with his powers and how his kind of It's a little bit ridiculous for this franchise, but not quite with some of the superhero shit that just regular humans are able to do, like The Rock in this movie. So you got a guy with like a metal spine, and he's got like Terminator vision, and he's very quick, and he's got this badass motorbike that like disassembles itself like the Batmobile so he can squeeze into tight spaces and whip around. He was a very entertaining villain. I love Idris Elba's like delivery and vibrato of his voice, and just the way that they utilize him. He's a hyped up human that you would need to face off against these two larger than life characters.
I'm Black Superman.
You're crazy.
Damn.
He really is Black Superman.
I personally like the fact that the movie does feel like it stands on its own. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be a Fast and the Furious film. There's enough sequences in here that kind of signature to Fast and the Furious will give you that edge, and we'll be like, oh yeah, this is a part of that other franchise. Like there's some NOS scenes where they show the shit going through the engine and everything, and you're like, ah yeah, Fast and Furious. But the movie does stand on its own. I think people actually could watch this movie without have seen any of the other Fast and the Furious movies, and you would be just fine. There's not gonna be really anything missing in this film without having the other 8 movies of knowledge. I'm not gonna spoil who, but there's a couple of really good and very funny cameos in this movie that were a complete surprise, and I'm glad that they did not put this in the marketing, because any other movie probably would have. When these 2 actors showed up, it was like, oh my god, this is gonna be great. And they were some of the funniest scenes in the entire film. And my final positive, I will say I would be just fine if this is the only Hobbs and Shaw film, because I do feel like they do pretty much everything you could possibly do with the concept of bringing those 2 characters together. But they do leave enough there, story-wise and kind of rivalry and relationship between those 2 characters, that I would totally welcome another film. If they have another Hobbs and Shaw come out in 2 or 3 years and they start doing like spin-offs between the regular Fast and the Furious franchise, hopefully they won't feel stale by then, but I would totally welcome it. I would watch another Hobbs and Shaw film, and that's commending this film for how much they're able to do with the concept and still leave me like, all right, I'll take a little bit more.
Access granted. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied.
Now moving on to the bad. This movie's stupid. This movie is incredibly stupid. There's things about it that you will be entertained by, like scenes that they actually showed in the trailer where a helicopter is attached to a chain and The Rock is holding onto a vehicle with this arm and holding onto the chain with this arm and holding onto a helicopter. Oh! In the movie, scenes like that are hilarious, and they're so ridiculous that you have fun with it. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, there's a lot of stupid shit in this movie that will make you roll your eyes. Some people will totally fly by it, they're on board for it, so everything is gonna be dumb and fun to them. Especially the dialogue. For me, there was moments where I was like, oh my god, this is horribly dumb. There's some exchanges between The Rock and Jason Statham that are genuinely funny, and there's some exchanges that feel like a 13-year-old wrote their dialogue, and it's just like, dude, this is just really, this is not corny good, this is corny bad, and there is a huge difference. There's also a bit of a pacing issue in the movie, and it might even be too long. You know, for as many huge, gigantic action scenes as there are in this film, when there's not an action scene, there was at least twice that I actually found myself dozing off. And they're not long extended sequences. It's not like you go a half an hour without an action scene. There's like maybe 10-minute stretches here and there where there's not something big or bombastic happening on screen. And there was a couple times where in that 10-minute stretch I was like, and I gotta attribute that to the director, David Leach. This is a guy who co-directed the first John Wick, which admittedly is not a very dialogue-heavy film. There's not really a whole lot going on outside of the action in that. And he has directed solely the Atomic Blonde film and Deadpool 2, both of which I would also say struggle between the action scenes. And that carries through here to Hobbs and Shaw. I just don't think the guy is very strong at making compelling scenes that have anything to do with drama or building character dynamics or not being an action scene. So it's not to the point where like if there's not an action scene, the movie's horrible, but they really do struggle to maintain your attention between those action scenes.
Mama, where's all our guns?
I get rid of them.
Very noble, Mrs. Hobbs. We're in serious trouble.
The movie also has a bit of a problem, which again probably goes to length. There's some things that could be cut, where they don't necessarily know when to quit a joke. You know, there's certain characters, there's certain jokes, there's certain back and forth that the movie continuously goes back to that was great the first time, not quite as funny the second time, and is damn right embarrassing the third time. And it's just to the point where I'm like, okay, it kind of leans into the first thing I was saying with it being really stupid, and maybe they're just trying to keep going and really just nail and throw everything at the wall with how dumb they know this is. It's very self-aware, but there's moments in this where a joke would have been great if they had cut it off after the first time, but when they revisit it, or they revisit a certain character's on-screen stigma too much, it kind of begins to lose its effect a bit. And my final negative with Hobbs and Shaw is something that's probably the least important thing to talk about with fans of movies like this, and that is the story. The story, the plot, the villain motivations, they are all generic, they are all recycled. The movie does absolutely nothing new. Nothing new at all story-wise. You know, you got Idris Elba's motivation and the big evil corporation that he works for, which is like the most same old shit that we've seen with dumb action films. There's this big corporation that's like hush hush and nobody knows about it, but they're controlling everything from behind the scenes. The whole thing with the virus, I mean, it's totally a plotline ripped right out of Mission Impossible 2, to the point where the first 5 minutes of the movie when they introduced this, I was like, it's kind of like Mission Impossible 2. And the movie doesn't really do anything different with it. Again, the action scenes and the banter between the two lead characters is why you're here. So the storyline is kind of an afterthought anyway for the audience. So it was an afterthought with the filmmakers, but you do have potential to do something new. They just didn't bother with it. So all in all, guys, this is a big, stupid-ass action film that knows it's a big, stupid-ass action film. So you are either in on the joke or you are completely out of the joke and you hate this. So you know who you are. This review is almost pointless. You can watch this trailer, and if it looks awesome, you will enjoy it. If it looks like dog shit, you're not gonna like it. It's a very easy film that is marketed perfectly, and it knows exactly what it is. It's fun, it's got some good leads, it's got some good interaction, there's some great action scenes, a really cool villain, and it does stand on its own from the Fast and Furious franchise, which is a very welcome thing. It doesn't need to feel like the other 8 movies, and it doesn't, but it's very stupid, some very bad writing with the dialogue, some very generic scripts, and it does go on a far bit too long. You could probably take 20 minutes off this film, I think it would be even better. So kind of a mixed experience, but if you know what you want when you walk into this, and what you want is what the trailer promises, the movie delivers what that promise was.
Tell me this is not happening.
This is the type of movie that's going to deliver a certain amount of good experience when you go to the theater to see these huge, gigantic action sequences, but this is not the type of film you need to rush out, bring the whole family to, and drop a whole bunch of money to see opening weekend. You will enjoy it just fine sitting at home and watching it online. So just hold on to your money and stream it. So what did you guys think of Hobbs and Shaw? Do you prefer this spin-off franchise to the regular Fast and Furious franchise? Did you like it more than those films, less than those films? Did you enjoy how big and dumb that it was, or did it annoy the piss out of you? Did you think that it went too far with the stupid, or was it just the right amount of dumb for you? Tell me all about Hobbs and Shaw and your experience with it down in the comment section below, guys. And keep an eye out, because I'm also going to be doing a ranking of the Fast and Furious franchise, all 9 films now, I believe. So quite a huge franchise that I did not think was going to come out of that little Point Break ripoff. So tell me your thoughts down below and we will discuss it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you guys want to check out some social media links, check that out down below in the video description for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My Teespring store, which is just below that, and it shows you all the Cody Leach merchandise. Definitely check that out. And my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. So check all that out, guys. And if you want to check out some more stuff like the past Fast and the Furious ranking and a couple of other reviews from the franchise, you can check those out by clicking right over here.